So because of my fandom of I Know What You Did Last Summer, I always associate you with Halloween.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit about Thanksgiving, Friendsgiving.
Let's do it.
How did this become kind of one of your favorite holidays?
Yeah, I Know You Did Last Summer's not scary anymore, thanks to James Wan. And his movies, which made mine more of comedies. But we love James. I know James, but man, that was cold-blooded. So Thanksgiving, I guess, would be more appropriate for me nowadays. My mom cooked, so that's what she taught me. Most of the life lessons I learned were in front of a stove. The first girl that broke my heart, I talked to my mom about it. It was in front of a stove. When I learned about my grandfather fighting in World War II, it was in front of a stove. Like, that's where my passion for cooking came, because that was my mother's and my main time to converse. She worked like a dog and had horrible hours, and when she would get home late at night was when our time came. She'd make me go to bed early because she wanted to have time with her son, which gave me horrible sleep habits to this day. But I love my mom because she shared so much adult stuff with me as a kid, because she knew I could handle it, and she knew it was important to kind of shape me into who my family wanted me to be. Now, I ended up making a right turn from that, but I'm still respectful and grateful. So Thanksgiving was always a big thing in our house. We were very traditional every single year, and my mom would bring in pretty much everyone who didn't cook to the house. Like, that was our time in the neighborhood where, like, the Martinez family, this guy Kirk Martinez, he was so cool, man. He kept me out of like trouble when I was a kid. He was an old school Mexican guy. When gangs tried to get me to join, he told them, yo, you better leave Freddie alone, and they did. Like, he was a man of respect. And so all these people would come over every year, and that became our tradition. When I moved to Los Angeles, and Sarah and I linked up, even before Sarah, we would do the Stragglers Thanksgiving. And the Stragglers Thanksgiving was all these young actors from acting class in their 20s, sometimes even in their 30s, who were broke, out-of-work actors, so they couldn't afford to fly back to Minnesota or to Texas, which is where every actor's from, in Florida. And they either go to New York or LA, and they're all really pretty. But we were all really broke. And sometimes they just didn't want to go home because they were chasing the dream, and that home it just made it not feel as realistic and as achievable. So we've had everywhere from 6 to almost 30 people at our Thanksgivings. It was always, we call it Straggler Thanksgiving. We still do it to this day. We put out the email every year for the people who can't make it. And because of that, my children, who are the son and daughter of 2 only children, have a whole bunch of uncles and aunts that they would have never gotten otherwise. And it's because of that food that brings us all together, to the point now where even people who can't afford to go home, they're like, man, I'll call my mom and tell her what's up in Minnesota. Or, do you have an extra seat for me? I always have an extra seat. Oh, even if we don't, we always have an extra seat. So our door's always open on that day, on the last Thursday of every year. And other than that, it's locked tight.
I mean, no matter how close you are with your family, if you get invited to hang out with Freddie Prinze and Sarah Michelle Gellar, like, you're gonna...
I got friends that would debate that. You know, I got friends that are over me pretty much and would only come for the food. They'd be like, well, your turkey's better, but that's the only reason why.
That's the only reason I'm gonna hang out. Now, you know, with family traditions, there's so many things that we want to honor from, like, our moms or our grandparents.
Yeah.
What are maybe some new traditions that you try to celebrate with the kids or try to bring into their lives?
You know, I don't break too many of my mother's rules. I broke too many outside of the cooking world to disrespect her that much. And this was back in the 70s and 80s when parents still whipped their children. So I don't break too many traditions like people do today. As far as the Thanksgiving dinner goes, I pretty much make it the same way my mother made it. The only difference being she believes in cranking up the heat at the end or in the beginning. She'll be open to that, to crisp the skin, and I don't do that. My turkey takes a little bit longer, but that's one place where we don't necessarily agree. And then there's a lot of other recipes, and I even talk about some of them in my cookbook where I'm like, look, this is basically my mom's recipe, but I made it better, and here's why. And Mom, if you're reading this, deal with this. So we talk some trash back and forth, and we get a little competitive still to this day. Once I got a real passion for cooking, we started competing with each other a little bit. But now she's older. She didn't have anybody to cook for but herself, so she's like, fine, you're better, I'm just ordering in. Like, she's not trying to slave over a stove for her. So at my heart, I'm a traditionalist. I've done some different things with turkeys in the past, but never consistently. It's always like, I'll try this, and then I go back to the original way.
Now, between, you know, your background in cookbooks with cooking and Sarah's as well too, is that one of the things that you guys first bonded over as far as recipe-wise?
You know, Sarah, that secondary career of hers when she sort of fell into the baking with food stirs and doing healthy desserts and ingredients your children can pronounce instead of chemically enhanced things, she got a passion for baking. I have zero passion for baking. One of my first jobs to help my family pay our bills when I was a teenager, a sophomore in high school, was I worked a graveyard shift at this restaurant called Hometown Buffet. And I would do all their desserts the night before, so they had them the next day. And this was while I was in school. This is why I did so poorly in school, because I had a job. But I had to bake so much food. I had to make so many cheesecakes. I had to do so much stuff that if I see a dessert, and it's in recipe form, I don't even want to look at it. Fortunately, my wife has a ton of passion for that and no passion for cooking. And she's much more left-brained. I'm much more right-brained, right? And baking is much more chemistry, a left-brained science. And cooking is much more right-brained because it's more artistic and you don't have to follow as many rules. You can experiment a little bit more. So we're very well suited for holiday meals because I cook, she bakes. She usually has to bake the day before on Thanksgiving because the oven is taken over by everything we're cooking in there. My daughter helps me out a ton. She has her signature squash that she does every single year. We started it off because that was the easiest thing, and she's kind of grown since then and wants to help out, and she'd do everything if I let her, I just don't.
Now, Sarah just posted these pumpkin chocolate chip donuts, which I am going to be making because that's all I've been thinking about the past 2 days.
Yeah, man.
But let's chat a little bit about Thanksgiving movies. So after you guys have had your meals, what do you guys do as a family as far as like bonding? Is there a particular movie you like to watch or activity?
We live in LA, so we have great weather. So as soon as dinner's over, we're playing outside most of the time, and the stragglers all contribute. I grew up in a martial arts family. My godfather's Bob Wall. That's the guy that trained Bruce Lee when Bruce came to America. First guy I ever sparred with when I was 4 years old was Chuck Norris. Chuck also broke my rib when I was 15 and thought I was cocky because I won a karate tournament, and he was like, no, you're not. Boom. It was an accident. He didn't mean to, but he meant to knock the wind out of me. It just happened. He's made out of solid steel, so it broke my rib. So my kids are both in martial arts. My daughter does jiu-jitsu. My son boxes with Wayne McCullough, who's a 3-time champion, a silver medalist in the Olympics back in the day, I think Seoul, Korea Games. And so they're very, Southern California, since the Karate Kid came out in the 80s, every great martial artist in the world was there. So they're very spoiled and entitled in that regard. So a lot of times we go outside, we wrestle, we do a lot of jiu-jitsu. I got my mats out there, we lay them out. It's a good way to work off your meal. We have heavy bags out there. My friends who have too much wine want to show how tough they are, and they fall on their butt, and my kids laugh at them. So we play a lot outside, a lot more. My favorite Thanksgiving movie, though, would be Home for the Holidays, with Holly Hunter and Robert De Niro, before Robert De Niro was Iron Man. You guys have to see this. It is so real to how families are, and it is so funny. It's my favorite thing. It's my favorite holiday movie, even more than Christmas movies and things like that. I highly recommend it. It's absolutely hysterical, and Robert Downey Jr., you'll see why people love him so much today if you watch some of his older stuff and realize why we fell in love with him in the first place. And it's a great chance to do that.
That's a great thing. I'm going to jump in here next to you for a quick
Jump in,
second.
man.
I'm going to ask 2 quick Star Wars questions and then let you be
Oh, we're doing Star Wars.
on your way.
Let me make you some room so you can slide in.
All right. So I got to briefly meet you during Star Wars Celebration here in Chicago.
Here in Chicago, yeah.
Tell me what that experience was like and just the fandom of the whole Star Wars community.
So it's weird. The only other Star Wars celebration I've been to was in Orlando, Florida. And my father back in the 70s, for those of you who don't know, he was Freddie Prinze. He was a famous stand-up comedian in the 70s. He had the #1 show in the country. It was called Chico and the Man. And he did this bit on the 3 major cities in America: New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. He said, New York, he goes, people are kind of angry all the time. They're mean. He goes, so a good example to figure out is like, he did this joke where it's like, hey, if you're driving down the road, your door's open there. He goes, in New York, they're like, oh, mind your own business, drive your own car, I hope you fall out. And he goes, in Chicago, hey, your door's open. He goes, now in Chicago, they're very nice, they're well fed. He said it gets cold there, so they drink, so they're always happy. He goes, oh, excuse me, your door's open. He goes, oh, well, I have 4 of them, would you like one? And he goes, in LA, we can't go into that because it was more about drugs. And he's like, hey, your door's open. Like, I didn't even know I had a door, baby. And so that's the 3 cities, right? So I had done a Star Wars celebration in Florida, and it's people from all over the world, but it's a lot of Floridians there too, right? The one is a very specific kind of Southern vibe. We come here to Chicago, and sure enough, it's a joke from the 70s rings so true today. All the Chicagoans, you would know right away, and it wasn't because of the accent. They were so respectful and so overly polite that I'd literally be like, yo, man, if you call me sir one more time, we're gonna have a problem. Like, you can call me Freddie, or I'm gonna start calling you sir. And they'd be like, okay, sorry, sir, sorry, sir. I'm like, what is that, sir? What are you doing?
That's when I know I felt older, was when people start referring to me as
Yeah,
as
so
sir.
I just call everyone out here sir and ma'am because I know they're gonna say it to me because they're so polite and so friendly. But I always have fun at those things because it's people asking questions about art that I know they're passionate about, right? So whether you love the new Star Wars or you hate the new Star Wars, everyone can still bond on a certain part of Star Wars, right? And that's what Star Wars Celebration is. I've never seen anybody, I mean, maybe fans are getting mad because someone's cutting in line, but I've never seen anything but love from every table. I mean, the amount of love they showed Hayden, because he had never gone to one before, Hayden Christensen, who played Anakin Skywalker, was so tremendous. And I remember sitting back watching that as they cheered when he came out. I was like, man, it's about time they gave him that love. And it's just a normal thing at these Star Wars Celebrations. It's so much love. So for that, I've always appreciated it, but it just made me laugh on how polite everyone was. They had all the event center staff there, and everyone is so polite. And I've done one in Boston, and it was just such a different experience. And I'm not gonna say I love Boston because I don't, but I like Boston. But the people there would be like, yeah, what do you want? And you're like, yo, man, I didn't even ask for anything. You're coming at me. Can I get you something? It's like, no, I'm good.
Freddie, get over here.
I don't
Come
want
on,
to be
come
yelled
here.
at. Do you want coffee or not? I'm like, I didn't ask for it. Whereas in like Chicago, they're like, good morning, would you like some coffee? Oh, you've already had some. Well, if you need any more, I'm happy to give it to you. You're just like, oh, this is so different and nice. So that's the main thing I remember from it. But at all of them, as far as like the fandom goes, it's always all love, man.
And then final question here for you. As far as Rise of Skywalker, because you're part of the Star Wars family, do you get to see it early? Are you bringing the family? What are your plans for Rise of Skywalker?
We could, if we wanted to. They're really cool about that kind of stuff. I prefer seeing it with real people as opposed to industry people. It's just always a better experience. But a couple Christmases ago, we spent it at the Lucas Ranch, and there was no one there because everyone was gone for the holidays. We had the whole like ranch basically to ourselves, and they screened it was the second of the newest trilogy, and it was just us in a theater, and they played the movie, and then after that they played 2 episodes of Rebels that my kids hadn't seen yet, of Star Wars Rebels. So I was like, whoa, this is kind of a cool experience too. But I miss having people cheering and screaming and booing and yelling, like that's why New York theaters are the best, right? Because a good example, I saw this bad movie. I'm not gonna say who was it, or Richard Gere was in it, but I'm not gonna say what movie. I have to say his name because it's important to the story. And I'm sitting there, I'm in the back of the theater. I love going to movies by myself, and I love seeing it with real people. And 10 minutes into the movie, something kind of ridiculous happened, and I hear this guy in the front row, and it only takes one. This guy in the front go, no, I'm out. And he gets up to leave, and you hear like 4 other people like, yeah, and like one of the guys like, fine, go. And they're all, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like I love seeing people's reactions to movies, like horror movies, when people are screaming, no, don't go in there. Oh my gosh. I don't get scared. When you've been in one, they're not scary, right?
Yeah.
Like when I worked for Vince McMahon in WWE, when I quit, I didn't watch wrestling for 6 months because you know how the trick's done. So I've been in a horror movie. They're not scary to me. So when I go, I'm there more for the reaction than to be scared. And in New York, it never lets you down. In LA, they're too cool for school.
Okay, next time in New York, gotta go check out the movie.
Oh, you
Yeah,
have
for
to.
sure.
See a horror movie because it's the best experience you'll have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, man.
That's awesome.